Vanilla World of Warcraft. There's truly nothing else like it, to include other expansions of the game. 40 zones, 20 dungeons, 7-ish raids, and just a few world bosses. There's something about this game that people can't seem to move past. Never in the history of WoW were the decisions you made as a player more important. You felt every talent, every green drop, and every small red pouch as soon as you'd equip it. As you made your way through these levels and zones, something in us imprints on the lands. The ecosystem becomes a part of us, and the environment leaves a lasting mark when we'd step away from the computer chair. For many of us who played vanilla growing up, the game started to feel like a second home. As adults, every now and then, we start to feel homesick and need to make a return to the game that helped shape who we are today. By now you guys have probably heard about the current boom on Classic Era servers. I myself am included in the group as one of the returning players to the world of vanilla, and I wanted to share a few thoughts on why I decided to do this and why I think others have joined in as well. There are a few key reasons why now makes the most sense that I haven't seen talked about too much on YouTube. Some of them have, but either way I thought I'd share. Now, this is a bit of an obvious one, but it's definitely the most important one to talk about here. Release schedule and timing can doom one version of the game, and Blizzard has had a really bad track record of releasing retail content too close to classic content. And when Season of Mastery launched just 1 month after the second phase of TBC, it split the player base even further between vanilla, TBC, and retail. At the time, I was extremely conflicted. I've been joined by my IRL friends and my brother for most of my World of Warcraft and Classic journeys, and getting all of us to dedicate enough time to level and raid on one iteration of World of Warcraft is hard enough. So when Blizzard announced that they were going to bring back vanilla in a seasonal format, right when my raid group and progression had started to click in TBC, I knew we wouldn't be able to choose both. I know a lot of other people felt the same way we did about this. I do contribute timing to be the number one reason that SOM didn't do as well as many of us had hoped. A lot of the changes that Blizzard put into the Season of Mastery seemed to be good, minus the availability of rank gear from the launch. That was pretty stupid, but I do believe that if timed better, boosted quest XP, improved raid mechanics, no debuff limit on the boss, more difficult encounters would have been enough to bring a lot more people back. Those of us that wanted to play SOM but didn't have time to juggle 2 games at the launch never started later because we felt like we were left behind, and with the accelerated timeline that came with the seasonal servers, that was mostly true. Regardless of the game having natural catch-up mechanics such as ZG and AQ20, a lot of people felt left behind and ended up not making a seasonal appearance. Despite its various setbacks and small player base, SOM actually had a lot going for it. There were quite a few guilds that cleared and farmed the content and came out of the season with their best gear, and this is the group of people I'm the most jealous of. So why am I talking about SOM so much? We're supposed to be focusing on Classic Era. Well, with Season of Mastery coming to a close, it's required seasonal players to log in and decide where to move their characters. This required action has brought a lot of attention to Classic Era servers, and as people move their characters to new servers, players start to notice other people logging in as well. This generates buzz, and next thing you know, we're back in business. Other players are not the only thing people have found when they made their switch to Era Realms, but also that they are no longer bound by a single server and instead are clustered together to make one PvE environment, one PvP environment for North America, and then same goes for the clusters on the other regions. And this clustering has lended a huge hand to the scale of the Classic Era revival. This honestly should have happened from the beginning of Classic Era servers. When the majority of the player base moved on to TBC in spring of 2021, there was zero shot that these Classic Era realms would actually survive, given that Blizzard decided to just copy and paste the progression to TBC realms and create these Classic Era realms, but only now 99% fewer players to occupy them. Because unless you wanted to pay $35, or it was later lowered to $15, your ass was going to Outlands or stuck in Classic Era forever. For the most part, outside of a few core guilds and servers, these realms have remained fairly dormant until now. A large amount of SOM players opted to continue their progression on these realms and are now playing with guilds and players on every server in the cluster. So SOM has effectively injected life into these Classic Era realms, and it's encouraged other players to make a return too. And it's not a small amount of people at all that were rolling fresh. On Whitemane PvP cluster, we have seen an absolute slew of people leveling, questing, running dungeons. 7 days a week, there are pugs, core guilds, advertising open raid positions, and then OGs like Dwarf Lord streaming Nax clears. Now that players from any server in the cluster can group up, raid, trade, and quest together, the realms are actually playable and people are taking advantage of it. I wanted to see just what we were working with here, so last Sunday night I started running a series of /whos, and I didn't realize the sheer amount of people leveling. For almost every class I had to search through level ranges to narrow it down, and it took quite a while. And I was able to determine that there were about 17 to 1,800 people playing on just the Alliance side at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. Another good indicator of population health is the auction house, and for what I've seen, there's typically anywhere from 2,500 to 3K listings with 8K to 10K total auctions. What's even more interesting about this is the economy is behaving similar to a fresh server would be like, and despite it being a dead beaten game with guilds clearing Nax and AQ. Level 1 to 150 crafting materials sell. Green gear with decent stats are posted and purchased in like just a few hours, really. There are high level pieces and recipes for sale that are generally up and down, as the player base seems to be pretty divided between fresh players and those continuing their SOM progression. But one thing is for sure, this multi-servered player experience seems to be thriving. Now that Wrath of the Lich King has been out for a good bit of time and players are finally getting the hang of the Old War hard difficulty, I think people are starting to feel some burnout. Progression rating can really take the wind out of you after a while, especially when people get there at a much faster rate than back in the day. People complained about Phase 1 Wrath not having enough content, and that was the case during the original release as well, but people also didn't have their reputations farmed out with full pre-raid bis and enchants the first week of its release. Players just consume content at a much faster rate than back in the day, and Phase 1 left something to be desired. I just think everyone was so excited for Wrath to finally come out, as it's most people's favorite version of the game, that they played the shit out of it. But burnout isn't what pushed me away from Wrath and back into vanilla. It actually had to do with some of the changes that Wrath brought to the table. And I know this is where I'm going to lose some people, but they always seem so afraid to complain about the king of the original trilogy, and I myself was included in this group for a long time. And while I do consider Wrath to be one of the best versions of WoW, I did notice a lot of precursors to future changes in retail that would eventually lead to driving players away in droves and begging for Classic to come back out. And we didn't know this at the time of the original Wrath release, but some of what we were enjoying at the time would eventually lead to the destruction of the game. And I'm going to leave out Dungeon Finder in this because it's not in Wrath Classic, but I do want to mention that by them taking it out of the game, it made leveling a complete chore. And just the fact that it was in the original version, they might as well have just kept it in there, because it really showed that these zones were not built for solo questing. There's a lot of great storyline quests that we get to see, which is awesome, but the rest of the leveling route is really death by dailies, and it was, for me, it was a miserable experience. I also want to preface this section with, I have not played Dragonflight. I've heard pretty much nothing but great things about the expansion, and if I had more time, I'd probably try it out. But you have to admit that there's a long, shit-paved road between Wrath and this one's pretty good. So when I talk about retail sucking, it's because for the better part of a decade, it did. Now, I probably shouldn't start a rant with this example, but honestly, it's a huge indicator of a change in mindset that Blizzard was starting to form. So during the Wrath pre-patch, I was doing my dailies in the Isle of Keldanas on my Paladin, and I noticed the talent tree enhancements right away with my damage, but I also noticed that all of a sudden I no longer needed to stop and drink. In fact, I could go through the entire Isle quest line and barely make a dent in my mana. These talents that I just mindlessly popped in while following a guide actually granted me a ton of different mana regeneration procs. And when Wrath finally dropped, I remembered, oh, Retribution Paladin gear and Prop Paladin gear doesn't even have intellect on it anymore, which was a staple of the class since vanilla. So me questing in my Brutal Gladiator gear set that had int on every piece gave me an unnaturally large mana pool for my new build. And I'm not trying to come off as an enthusiast for needing to stop and drink, but I do think that this is an indicator that is reflected in other aspects of the game. Trading a sense of accomplishment for convenience is a trend that would grow and repeat itself into later expansions. Not that stopping to drink is an accomplishment, but when you stop earning those little things, the big things don't feel as big. Okay, so in previous versions of this video, I go into a bit of a rabbit hole here on how we start to see Blizzard generalizing the classes in Wrath of the Lich King, Anyone who's played other expansions after Wrath knows that over time the class identity gets stripped away and more with each release until the classes are basically just tank, heals, melee DPS, and range DPS with different color palettes and animations, but functionally they are all serving the same purpose and even have the same ability types to fill these roles, with resource management just being a minor mechanic. I decided that while there is evidence of this in Wrath, it's not anything nearly as outrageous as what we'd see in Mists of Pandaria or Warlords of Draenor, but it is still happening and we know where it leads. So I've decided to just reduce this argument to pointing out some of the ways Blizzard has already planted that seed. I'm going to use Paladins and Warriors here again, as these are my main classes in Wrath and I'm most familiar with their talent trees. I've already talked about how Paladins receive passive mana regen, and very similarly we see Warriors receive more rage regen and even get refunded rage from avoided abilities. Now that Paladins and Warriors don't manage their resources from their gear, and I do include Warriors in this, even though Warriors didn't see raw resource stats like Intellect on their gear, they did see rage generation bonuses on their sets in Vanilla and TBC. They do get a discount in rage from their Wrath Phase 1 tier set, but it's rarely used because their regen from talents is already so good, and it's the last we'll see of this bonus anyways. But with Int-Out, gear that both of these classes need is increasingly similar, with one class gearing towards haste and Warriors gearing towards armor penetration. Everything else is the same. They both want strength and crit as well as expertise, but at a much lower rate than hit because they both have benefits from avoided attacks, such as Warriors getting refunded rage and Paladin abilities such as Exorcism and Hammer of Wrath not being dodgeable. Wrath also brings in a lot of new abilities and improves old abilities that make Paladins work functionally closer to Warriors. Paladins now get Righteous Vengeance. It's a holy version of Deep Wounds. Both of these classes now share passive benefits from their critical strikes with damage over time. Paladins even gain an extra bonus from crit outside of double damage, but I'll get to that. Sanctified Wrath is a new Paladin talent that increases the chance to get a critical strike with their Hammer of Wrath, the Paladin version of Execute. That is an instant cast as of TBC, but it wasn't viable in raids back then due to its mana cost. Well, as I mentioned before, with Paladins' improved talents, they don't have to worry much about resources anymore, so now both classes have the ability to execute. Another new button for Pallies to press, Divine Storm, is an instant cast ability where a bunch of magic hammers fly around the caster doing AoE damage, and even some healing to nearby party members. It's just a better healing version of the Whirlwind ability seen in the Warrior's toolbox. Seal of Command now behaves similarly to Warrior's Cleave, only a warrior needs a glyph for it to actually hit 3 targets. Warriors receive a new ability called Blood Surge that gives abilities a 20% chance to proc an instant slam, while Paladins talent into Art of War, which increases the damage of their instant attack abilities by 10%, while also making Exorcism an instant cast after dealing a critical strike. Also, Paladins now have a glyph to make Hand of Reckoning, the new Paladin version of Taunt, another similarity, no longer generate threat, so they can just use this as some spicy instant damage. It doesn't exactly have a warrior equivalent, so let's just say now that warriors have a taste for blood, the talent that has a high chance of proccing an overpower, Pallies get another button to press too. I know that's a reach, but warriors have to glyph for an extra cleave target, so Paladins having to glyph for instant damage, I'd call it an even trade. I could go on and on about this all day, but the truth is that Paladin DPS was so bad it almost wasn't a thing outside of PvP and vanilla, so all of these changes are appreciated and honestly a ton of fun to play. What I'm trying to say here is that they came with a cost. Wrath balancing is pretty good, I just think it planted a seed. It started to blur some lines that would eventually be completely removed and possibly re-added in Dragonflight. Like I said, I haven't played. But I thought TBC balancing was pretty good too. I don't know if the warriors in my guild just sucked, but I always out DPS them. Paladins got Crusader Strike, an instant attack they much needed. They also got Wings or Avenging Wrath, their God Mode button that was like an attack power version of Recklessness or one of the many other warrior God Mode buttons. But in TBC, the Paladins playstyle wasn't nearly as close to warriors. It was a lot more unique, and I prefer Seal Twisting and Haste Potions to playing cooldowns like it's Guitar Hero. Warriors see some upgrades in both TBC and Wrath, but it still feels like you're playing a warrior in all 3 versions. Paladins are unrecognizable from their state in vanilla, and I've always enjoyed that Paladin playstyle. It was hard work and required some real effort to be good at, learning to seal twist, farming out your items to increase your performance. If you really pushed it, you could earn your stripes, where it was just given to warriors. Some flavor is gained, some flavor is lost, but if you ask me, I think TBC had the better approach. But hey, that's just me. So let's get back to vanilla. And one of the most important, most unique things about vanilla was its gear. And it almost had this non-linear style of gear progression. And what I mean by that is the next raid tier might not replace your current gear. That new set may be aimed for a completely different playstyle of your class, or you don't wear the tier set at all. Gearing in vanilla was more like a balancing act rather than blindly following a BIS list. For the most part, everyone knows exactly what their best in slot stuff is, but getting there can take a while, and if you're just blindly following a website one piece at a time, then you're leaving DPS or threat on the table. That's not a good idea at all. So players would oftentimes find themselves having to mix and match set bonuses, on equip effects, and even chance on hit or on use items to balance their stats, remain hit capped, and also put up the most damage. And these decisions were always really fun to me and added a campiness, sort of living out of your backpack type of feel. You're switching your gear around a lot in vanilla for different encounters, and that was really fun to me. This was exaggerated even more so with the fire resist, nature resist sets that you would need for AQ and molten core, especially the fire resist sets you use frequently throughout the game. So this balancing act also makes raid gear relevant longer. By that I mean each tier set and each epic is not necessarily going to replace the other. That wasn't the case for every spec and role, but old raid gear could become useful to you later down the line. You might not be able to lose hit chance on your current set after unlocking a few other pieces, though. You may be presented with new gear choices, and that's what I like about vanilla. These choices are super impactful. And don't get me wrong, there will be times in Wrath where you have to make a gear choice between two upgrades, but the difference is going to be small. The truth is that these new class engines are much more finely tuned in that you are going to be playing the class and not making your gear choices work for your build. Most players will blindly follow the BIS list one piece at a time, and they'll be able to get away with that because their classes are simply just more built out. Also, Wrath raiding is just miles ahead of vanilla. 25-man is just a massive improvement on 40-man raids. I do think that Season of Mastery did a great job on improving with this, with the unnerfed boss mechanics that apparently didn't see the original release. They coupled this with getting rid of the debuff limit on raid encounters, also the amount of potential drops to help with faster raid progression. All of these are great changes that needed to happen to support seasonal play, so I won't talk about raiding too much. Vanilla did, however, offer some of the coolest weapon, armor effects, and I'd like to talk about the gear instead because that really is the highlight of vanilla. The gearing in this game is so special and so flavorful, even at the earliest levels. Only in this version of the game can specific items and sets unlock new playstyles. This is completely lost in TBC when a lot of these types of effects no longer work after level 60 or are tuned down in the rating system. So there's a lot of flavor that was removed during the balancing of this game, and I'd like to take another video to just talk about this, like even hunter pets, tameable rare spawns, having special abilities that are tuned out during TBC. Just these things that were too hard to balance and continue are lost, but they're encapsulated in vanilla, and that's what makes it so great. Okay, so the first item I have to talk about is Anathema and Benediction, the two names for the 2-in-1 priest staff with the ability to transform from Benediction, the healing staff, into Anathema, the shadow staff. Every half hour the staff could do this transformation, and not just in stat value but in distinct look. This fan favorite can be created through a quest chain that starts by looting the Eye of Divinity from Major Doro's chest in Molten Core. It's an absolute staple of the class and of the game. Next up, we have the Rogue, Shadowcraft, and Darkmantle sets. These are super cool for a lot of reasons. The first being is that this set is put together from a series of dungeon drops. For those of you guys who don't know, each class in vanilla has its own blue dungeon set that can be farmed out and then later converted to its tier 0.5 epic version. But the real reason that this is so cool is because these sets both have the gnarliest set bonus. This has a chance on hit to restore 35 energy, and since Rogue's dual wield, this can proc off of both of your weapon swings, rewarding the player 70 energy from a single weapon rotation. The blue Shadowcraft set can achieve this with 6 pieces, where its epic cousin, the Darkmantle set, receives this bonus with only 4 pieces needed. It's absolutely delicious. Next up, we have another weapon for you guys, the Dark Edge of Insanity. I love playing on PvP servers, and it's on-hit weapon effects like this that make vanilla so tasty. And this bad bitch boasts a chance on hit to disorient the target for 3 seconds. It's like a rogue's blind. It can interrupt, and it can't be broken from damage. It also has a 100% chance to make you smile every time it procs. Now, I could seriously talk about this all day with weapons, armor bonuses, trinkets, and even farm consumables, engineered abilities. Some items have similar procs and are easier to get and can be a lot of fun to use, but these are just a few of my favorites. I'm going to close this section with my personal favorite armor set bonus, and that is the Mage Tier 2 Netherwind Regalia set. The 6 set bonus of this tier is unheard of outside of WoW, and it's a prime example of an armor set opening up a new playstyle. It has a 10% chance after casting Arcane Missiles, Fireball, or Frostbolt that your next spell with a cast time under 10 seconds will cast instantly. Guys, this includes like basically all of your abilities are in under a 10-second cast time. You can Pyroblast instantly after this thing procs and blippity blap the shit out of something like right off the face of the earth. PvP or PvE, this thing is fucking awesome. There are a ton of other crazy items and bonuses in the game, guys, so I'll link a few videos in the description that can really take you through some of the gems. But my point with all this is that you can't find stuff like this in any other version of WoW. Like I said, TBC brought a lot of balance to the game, and for most people that's a really good thing. It's too hard to balance these types of abilities expansion after expansion, and that's fine. I get it. And it really makes sense, but it also makes vanilla the most unique version of the game, and it's one of the main reasons why people can't stop playing it. The mixing and matching and leveraging your options and opportunities playstyle isn't for everyone. Some people prefer to just follow the BIS list and not think about it, but to me and many others, this is what makes WoW exciting, and after all, the game is about getting pixels. Also, I guarantee that earning a set that generates more energy, generates more rage, will fill the player with more of a sense of pride than Blizzard just making the classes generate more resources by changing the talent tree. So to piggyback off of what I said in the beginning, there's really just nothing like vanilla WoW. It's not balanced, it's not tuned, it's difficult where most people say it should be easy, and it's easy where others say it shouldn't be. It's far from perfect, and that's why we love it. It's ours, and it is what we make of it. Okay, so the last reason, for those of you who don't know, the legendary content creator for Classic and co-creator of the Rested XP Guidon, Cargos, with the help of a few other founders, created their own game mode in the world of vanilla World of Warcraft. It's entirely enforced by a team of mods, the community, and an extremely intuitive and very connected add-on, but solo players, duos, and trios can attempt to battle their way 1 to 60 through the world of Azeroth without dying, using only their abilities, run mates, or their own professions. No auction house, no mailbox. You may know them from the Race to Rag hardcore event, where the entire hardcore team were successful in completing the world's first Molten Core clear just a few short weeks after Season of Mastery launched. And now the hardcore community is taking things to a whole new level with their hardcore Allstars dungeon esport, and it really is like an esport where hardcore players race from fresh to dungeon ready or not so dungeon ready in just a few short hours, and then be drafted by the challenge's all-star captains to form dungeon teams. The teams make it the further, the fastest win, and the prize pool has been from $500 to $5K depending. They're gearing up characters right now for a new event, so check out the link in the description below, because we really cannot talk about vanilla Classic era's revival without talking about hardcore. These guys do everything for the community, they do everything for vanilla, so thank you so much for the events, the challenge, and God bless you. This video ended up being a lot longer and a lot more ambitious than I thought it was going to be. I really had a ton of fun making it, and I've rewritten and re-recorded and rewritten and re-recorded this video about 5 times now. I actually am just now re-recording this part last, because last time I recorded it, it was at 6 a.m. after working all night, and I just sounded completely dead. So I also just came up with better ways and easier ways to explain my point of view, and I think at this point it's just important that I get these ideas out there. And I know not everything I said in this video video was groundbreaking and sometimes obvious, but I guess if I'm going to make a video on this subject, I need to cover all of those obvious points in case someone is new to the information. So if it was obvious to you, then thanks for hanging in there. I'll probably end up making more videos further breaking down some of the points I brought up here. I just needed to get this out there and off my chest. There's just been this need in me to have this dialogue with whoever would listen, even if it's just a small group of people. I want to summarize with, I think that Wrath is a really good and worthy expansion to World of Warcraft. Before Classic, I probably would have said that this was my favorite version, followed by TBC, followed by Vanilla. Maybe it's just my age talking, or maybe it's me just fully appreciating the gift I was given in the 5th grade when my aunt got me the original version of World of Warcraft for Christmas. But I'd say my favorite versions of WoW are already in the order that they were released. There is a lot that could be done for the next season of Mastery that I would like to see. I have a pretty unique idea that I'm still testing out on a private server, so when I confirm that it's actually doable and would work, I'll probably make a Season of Mastery 2 what I'd like to see type video. I'm not trying to say that Vanilla is flawless or the only version of WoW that I'll play. It's just the one I favor the most. For most people, Wrath will be the best option. The raids are better, the gear progression is easier, the PvP system is balanced through talents, abilities, and arena comps. But the leveling was garbage. The zones were asleep, completely dead. There's no reason to leave Dalaran after level 80, and I'd rather level 1 to 60 10 times than finish leveling my alt in Wrath, but I'm getting carried away. I guess what I'd like to close with is that it's not just the Warcraft, but the world that I love. And in Vanilla, I get the best combination of both. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you out there.